We're joined today on the program by Joe Rose to talk about the state of the Miami Dolphins post first wave of free agency and entering the 2024 NFL Draft.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are joined today on the program by the great Joe Rose of WQAM, former Miami Dolphins player, longtime radio personality in South Florida. Good friend of mine. He's been awesome to me since I've started covering the Dolphins as part of my career in sports and football media, and always look forward to the opportunities that I have to talk with Joe. He's a frequent member, the most frequent guest here on Locked On Dolphins in my time as the host of the show. I am often on the Joe Rose Show in the mornings in South Florida, so a little bit of back and forth. We got a great conversation cooked up for you here today, so let's go ahead and dive in. Joined here on the program by Joe Rose, a longtime friend of the show, frequent guest here on Locked On Dolphins. Joe, it's great to see you. How things going?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. It's exciting. We're a couple weeks away from the NFL draft. And you know what? Who would ever thought after all these years, the draft would become such a huge event for the NFL in the offseason? Heck, it's unbelievable what it's turned into.
Yeah, the NFL has certainly mastered the off-season calendar and giving fans constantly something to look forward to. And the draft after free agency and the combine is obviously next on that list. But I want to start our conversation. I've obviously been on Joe Rose Show a few times this offseason, but this is the first time you're back on Locked On Dolphins since the league calendar year started in March. And the saying goes, expectations minus reality equals disappointment. And I'd love to hear from your perspective what your expectations were for free agency, how free agency started, and what this team has been able to do since then, and what that has done for your outlook on the football team.
So, Kyle, let's start with this. I kind of got the picture right off the bat that there was going to be a lot of money to spend on free agency. There wasn't going to be any big free agent splashes. It wasn't going to happen. And sure enough, we lost a couple of guys that got paid, two of the top free agents in the market, and Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt were able to get paid big time money. The Dolphins weren't going to do that at the guard position. They're not going to do that at the defensive tackle position. So then I think I was kind of curious with all the other guys they lost, Van Ginkel, to see what they were going to get. I thought they did a nice piece of bringing in veteran guys. I think right now you look at the roster, I was a little down the first couple of days like everybody else, and you see really good players go out, and you're seeing other guys come back, but they're not at the same level of what you lost. But the core of really good players are here still. They got a lot of good players. I think this draft is one of the biggest drafts, if not the biggest draft, that our general manager, Chris Greer's had, because the only way to fill this up and upgrade it, because we either still need starters, or we need to upgrade the veteran players that they've kind of patched into these jobs for right now, that I'm going, we can do better. We can develop some young guys if you hit the right guys in the draft. And so I think this draft is huge. Whether the first round pick, they keep it or they slide out of it or not, they got to find some really good players, Kyle, in those first couple of rounds, because they need some guys come in. And if they don't start, they need to be rotation guys or give you depth. Because we know one thing about the National Football League. It always sounds great before the year. You look at it and go, oh, this is our team all year. And then the injury bug hits. And it hit, and we got lucky for, I'd say, 2/3 of the season. It looked great. And then, wow, we started getting hit with key guys, and we just didn't have enough players. And so I'm really looking at adding depth. Everybody gets bored with the back end of a roster. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we have learned as much as anybody. It's important to still find good, young, quality guys. And I think the one thing we need to do a better job, we kind of we kind of traded a lot of our draft picks over the last couple of years. We got to get back to draft, man. The draft is cheap when you hit on guys, especially for a couple of years. We got to get back to that. And then, it gets down on our shows, Kyle, as you know, and I've talked to you a lot about this. Just comes down to what you think is important. The safety position, find another pass rusher, because when Bradley and Jaylen are going to be ready to go. Defensive tackle, can we upgrade the defensive tackle from that group that they have right now? I think most people say yes. There's a young guy out there that can give you upside and help you in a lot of different ways. But they do have 4 or 5 positions. A third wide receiver, I think, is really important if you can't get it through free agency. And then everybody's got their favorite 4 or 5. I still like to get a young offensive lineman. I'd still like to bring in another guy, not just go with that group of guys from last year.
So you mentioned the need for a few starters along the way and foiling that with depth. Curious, what are the non-negotiables for you? Where do you need starters that you don't currently have them as the roster currently stands?
I'd like to upgrade the defensive tackle position. I look, and I've asked you about this too, about, the group of guys, Benito Jones and Jonathan Harris and Tier Tart now has come in out of FIU that's got a lot of starts. Gallimore. I just look at all the names. I'm looking here at the board, the roster board here, and I just I think there's a better player out there. I do, and I'd rather develop a guy in one of those first couple of picks. So I think you don't have a Christian Wilkins. You have anything close to Christian Wilkins with that whole group. Pass rusher, run stopper, guy that can make all the plays he makes, because he got where he's pretty damn good on first, second, and third down, and so durable. So durable. So that position, I might surprise you on the second one, safety. To me, you've got Javon Holland and you've got Jordan Poyer. I think you need another guy in there, a guy to rotate. 2 safety not going to do it.
It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on each and every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So I guess where you look at it from here is you've talked about the need for a couple starters. The Dolphins really took some of that money that freed up with Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins, and they have spent it across more players to kind of work on the depth. What is the one depth spot that you feel is the most urgent for Miami as a player that doesn't have to take a majority volume of snaps, but the one depth player that needs to be better than what it is right now?
That's a great question. And I bounced around on this a little bit as I look at the roster. The unknown, that's the most frustrating part, is the injuries to 2 first-round picks on the outside, and Bradley and Jaylen at the defensive end position. Everybody's all over the board that tries to play doctor on these guys. We got a head coach that's super positive. They're going to be back, and it's going to be like Jalen Ramsey, and they're going to be back before you guys know it. Does that mean 4 games? Does that mean they're just going to miss camp and be ready after 2 games? Does that mean we're going to take our time and give them 4 to 6 weeks of regular season? We do know this. We saw it at the end of the year. We need pass rushers. So all of a sudden, it sounds weird to say. As a pass rusher, as a 4th guy, be Shaq Barrett. If the other 2 can't play, all of a sudden that's, the start set. We got to play games in September, and if they're not ready and the team's got a pretty good idea they're not going to be ready or at 100%, then maybe that pass rusher position becomes the most important, because you got to have a rush. You'll be blitzing every down to try to get there.
So at this stage, let's shift focus towards the draft a little bit. When you consider the pick at 21, and you've already alluded to the weight that this draft class is going to carry for Miami in continuing their competitive window. Do you have a preference on what you think you'd like to see the team do? I know there's kind of this split and faction between getting more draft picks and favoring trading out no matter what. Is there a short list of players that you feel like makes a sense to stick and pick regardless? Where do you fall on that fence of let's prioritize a few with 21 and 55 rookie contract players that can come in and be starters versus getting back to what they were early in the rebuild, which was picking by volume at the expense of potentially picking higher?
Yeah, that's a great one. Every year seems like we talk about this. If you're in love with somebody at 21, really in love, and you got them high in your board, everybody's board's different. Chris Greer's got a different board than everybody else. If there's somebody on there that you're really crazy about, one thing Chris Greer means when he says, "I'll take the best player." If there's somebody on there that happens to be at one of these 3 or 4 or 5 positions I've just thrown out at you in the first 5 minutes, then take them. If you're going, man, this guy's got a chance to be a star, then take him. I'm not going to be surprised, though, if Chris Greer jumps out at 21 because they do need to add more than just 1 or 2 guys. We need some guys that get in the rotation, if not start. So I wouldn't be surprised if they want to get in the 3rd round and get a top 90 pick. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get another 2nd round pick and go into this thing with 2 2s and a 3. I think he'd be happy with that, with the thought, it doesn't change to me. Like, no. If that's the case, we need 3 guys in those top 90 picks can come in and sign those contracts and get out there. And we're not looking at the inactives during the week or special teams for a couple of snaps. We need some guys to get in there and get some rotation. And because the only way you're going to get better early in the season is young guys got to play. And then the upside of getting their confidence and feeling more comfortable in the schemes and the way you use them, that's how you develop your team for the second half of the season and not depend on guys that have played a long time. They're starting to break down and the injury bug. We got some injury bug guys on this team now. We've re-signed some injury bug guys. The offensive line scares me a little bit. We're coming back with, you look at that and you go, ooh, okay, Kendall Lamb, 3rd tackle, Teron, Austin, Robert Jones, Isaiah Wynn's been hurt almost every year he's been in the league. How much he's good when he played, but he missed half the season. Do I trust him? And so, again, you and I have talked about this one. You can get an offensive lineman, and I don't care if he's a center guard or a pure center. I know a lot of guys aren't sold on Aaron Brewer, just not sold that the drop off from what you had to what you're going to is just, and we'll find out in this blocking scheme. Maybe he'll be fine. I'd like to see some fresh legs and a new body in there in one of those top 2 picks. I wouldn't have a problem with that. If somebody told me we were going to go a defensive tackle and an offensive lineman with the first 2 picks or a pass rusher in there, I'd have no problem with it at all.
Is there any spots that you kind of scratch your head? I know that was one of the things with the Cam Smith pick last year with all the corners that were brought in. You kind of said, really, that you go corner with your first pick in the 50s in the 2nd round. And then to piggyback off of that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on you talking about the ideology of playing young players early. How do you think Cam Smith fits into that puzzle with Jalen Ramsey obviously back and Kendall Fuller being brought into the mix this year?
So I think Cam Smith's one of the luckiest men on that roster right now in the offseason. The guy that didn't like him is gone, and Vic Fangio. And now he gets a fresh start with the guy that drafted him and Chris Greer out of South Carolina, that his son knew the guy. And a coach is super positive, building him back up. And Jalen Ramsey guys go, he can play. It was on Vic, and he should have been playing. Well, first of all, one thing I do know, he's got to grow up. Part of the maturity thing is, but he's going to get every chance possible to be out on the football field now. He's going to get a chance. don't think they didn't forget he's a second-round pick that they took just a year ago. He can get a fresh start like Vic Fangio was never here coming back in year 2. That's like forgotten. I've gone at it with some guys that like, oh, Vic was a grumpy old man. And I don't personally believe, even if you're an old school tough coach, Don Shula was going to play the best guy, whether he liked him or not, whether he liked the way the walk, liked the way he talked. If he was the best player, he was going to friggin' play on Sundays because Shula would do never getting away and winning friggin' games. And I got to believe Vic Fangio's that way. And I know he's been kind of bad mouth going out the door about everything. And, you know, some of the guys didn't like him and they didn't like. He was all business now. He was business. He didn't want to make small talk with you. Don't ask about my girlfriend. Don't ask about my life. Football, just football. That's our relationship, football. And it's just completely different than the head coach. I mean, it really wasn't a great match, no matter what anybody says. As good as he was as a defensive coordinator, he did some great things. It just didn't really fit in the way he was compared to what the head coach wanted, what he wanted the vibe of the team to be, the culture to be. I thought sometimes he thought Mike was a little too super positive about everything. And Vic's got a little old school in him at age 65.
How do you think Anthony Weaver complements that and foils against that from what you've seen of Anthony Weaver so far?
So my gut feeling is this has been discussed and will never happen again. I think it was a learning experience for Mike. And Mike was prepared. Hey, Vic, come in here. You're basically a head coach of the defense. Keep me up on what we're doing. But, hey, man, everybody's using part of your defense in the league. Everybody that's been underused, gone somewhere and used a lot of things. And by the way, he did some really good things. We got third or fourth in the NFL in total defense there before the Ravens game. It was pretty damn good. But I think the message is on. Coach them hard. What do you say? Coach them hard and hug them. Love and hug them hard. So I think there's a guy that still wants to get after him a little bit, but also after practice wants to put his arm around him, tell him you're doing great, man. Hang in there. You know, sometimes I got to be tough on you on certain things because I know you can do it, man. I know you can do it. And I think that's part of the message that Mike's going to make sure. And when he interviewed and when he was deciding what coach he was going to go with, I think that was a big part. He wants everything that's going from him as the head coach to his offense. He wants it on the defensive side of the ball. You know, you can do it the right way. I'm not worried about that play. Yeah, you blew it. You got beat. You were out of technique. You took the wrong gap, but I know you can do it the right way. So I think this will be a good fit. And by the way, he's seen what a really good defense looks like because he was part of a really good one in Baltimore. So I'm really looking forward to different things he's going to do to get the most out of him. But we still got to get him some more talent. We get him some more players.
So I guess the last question that I have kind of on that focus is you've talked about the learning experience of Fangio and what's different. And obviously from year 1 to year 2, there was some growing pains from the coaching staff and communication and getting plays in on time. So this is yet another first-time head coach hire for the Dolphins, which I think is however many in a row since Jimmy Johnson, I think was the last non-first-time head coach hired by the Dolphins to be a head coach of the football team. What has this experience of a first-time hire been like from your perspective versus some of the other first-time hires that Miami has gone through over the recent history of the franchise?
About head coaches now? Are we talking?
Yeah, head coaches.
So one thing I've really liked, I am a big Mike McDaniel fan, and I know not everybody is and think that he's still too easy on guys and stuff. I think he relates really well. I think his communication skills are great. I think when he says something, he believes it. I don't think he's just throwing stuff out there. And he looks at things that he doesn't do well. He's a great self-evaluator in the offseason. I really like that. He's not like, hey, this is the way I do it, and it's going to work, and I'll get the right guy. So he'll make changes. You know, guys go to him, hey, wasn't getting plays in the first year. Did a much, much better job with that and get more comfortable. And I think he's going to look at – I give you one stat he's going to look heavily at. 3rd-and-1, just to throw it around the 3rd-and-1 family. How do we do a better job of 3rd-and-1? One thing that number 1 or number 2 defense in most categories didn't do well was 3rd-and-short. Did not. Got finessey, tried the screens outside, and did it that way because he felt more comfortable. The other one is fade routes to some of the guys, the guys outside. Not a huge fan of those, but I think Mike's going to learn from all that stuff, and I think he understands. They got to get better in those areas. Explosive plays, the running game outside as good as anybody in football. Both of them built with speed. Mike got a lot out of those 4 speed guys, throwing Jaylen Waddle in there with 3 track guys, running backs, and of course Tyreek Hill. He got a lot out of that. I mean, it was fun. I know you were at some of the games with me. It was fun to watch. I mean, drinking after the game a couple more beers, going, this is fun to watch now. It was most entertaining, minus a few of the games, the most entertaining, some of the creative things Mike does. So I think Mike does a lot of good things. I really do. And I see the way he deals with guys. And listen, guys, they're going to go through their own stuff, man. They're going to go through personal stuff in their lives. They're going to go through slumps. I think Mike's really good to handling things. And again, it's new school. It's not old school. It's not kicking you in the butt. And I think when Mike has to be tough, he can do it. But most of all, he's built a culture that guys, I really believe, want to play in. I think if he had enough money, he'd have half the league want to play for him if they could just come down here and be part of it. I think word spread about everything from the stadium, the natural grass, to the new training facility, and everything else. But I think a big part of it, when you look at recruiting tools, I think Mike McDaniel's now up there with state taxes that you save. I think he's right there at the top.
Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, available only to U.S. customers. So you mentioned some guys will go through some stuff and some personal stuff. And one guy that's already been in the headlines a couple of times this offseason is Tyreek Hill. And Miami has done a lot from the way of the salary cap to adjust contracts and create salary cap space. But one contract that they have not touched is the Tyreek Hill contract. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on what that may or may not say about Tyreek Hill, the outlook beyond 2024. Is it an appetite more for a contract extension? Is it an appetite for a restructure? Is it an appetite to keep our options open for moving away from Tyreek Hill? It's just very surprising to have this team in a salary cap crunch and have a $30+ million cap hit with $15+ million in freeable space that they didn't touch.
I thought they would, by the way. I thought, and I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, thought they're going to be coming to us to free up some money. You'll be getting a nice check in the offseason. Because I thought they would too. I mean, that'd be the first contract I thought they'd go to. It's interesting because I get asked about Tyreek Hill a lot. Look, I wish Tyreek Hill could handle his business a little bit better in the offseason. Yeah, without the drama stuff that pops up that he's had, the 3 or 4 incidents, that he's put himself in, or stories that have come out. But I got to tell you, man, the guy that plays football is tough, plays hurt. The best player on the football team, he's the best player on the football team. Check that. It's not even close. He's the best player on the football team. The things that he can do, his confidence when he runs on the field. I just feel like guys like, let me get behind this dog. This is a dog right here. So from a football standpoint, man, he's everything. I just feel like what you gave up for him, it was a great trade. We needed somebody like that could go on the road with a little strut to him and let everybody know, you got to cover me, you're in trouble, and then back it up with 2 years that he's put together. But at the same time, I just wish the other stuff, you get to 30 years old or 29, 30 years old, I could do without some of that stuff that you shouldn't have to deal with, man. Your life is set. Now it's about staying in great shape and playing, 2, 3, 4 more years with that great speed he has and using it the way he has to be explosive and stay down here. Cause I know he loves playing down here. But yeah, I was a little surprised the contract didn't get redone. I didn't see any of those, those things, the lawsuits and, all the other stuff, the TMZ stuff that popped up. Not exactly what teams want, from their best players. But, boy, I'll tell you what, I think you'd agree with this. From the time he runs out on the field and gets introduced, you wonder what the show's going to look like, man. Mm-hmm. You never go grab a beer or a soda or a hot dog when you find out it's first down and they throw a slant, because you don't know when that slant's going to go to the house or end up being a 30-yard play or a 50-yard play. And if safeties don't help corners, they get smoked. And we saw it over and over again. One bad step by a safety, one missed jam on the line of scrimmage, and you got yourself a big play.
So I have 2 more for you. The next one is piggybacking off of that conversation for Tyreek Hill. And Jaylen Waddle's kind of become the 2 in this offense, or at least he was this past year. Versus the previous season, he led the league in yards per reception and had a lot more explosive plays. What do you think the ceiling is for Jaylen Waddle as he continues to mature as a player? And they're getting ready to, Chris Greer alluded to, the plan is for him to be a part of the organization for a long time. And we'll look for that contract extension to hopefully get done sooner rather than later, because the price is only going to continue to go up. But, you just got done heaping all this well-deserved praise for Tyreek Hill, the football player, between the lines. But Jaylen Waddle, what's the ceiling for you in your mind for who he can be as a wide receiver in the NFL?
Well, Kyle, you hit it right on the head. I thought it was 1A, 1B the year before, yards per catch, what Jaylen did. And by the way, Jaylen seemed comfortable. Just my read, bus, hotel, field, body language. He seems okay, understanding how good Tyreek is and playing his role. We've been lucky. We haven't had wide receiver drama. But I do agree. He is, really good. If he's not some form of a 1 receiver, he's definitely a really good 2 receiver. And I think he's going to be motivated to stay really healthy, get that yards per catch up, get the touchdown numbers back up, and get some more targets with that. But I am really curious to see. That's going to be an interesting one, because you look at what these receivers got paid this offseason. Guys have been suspended from the league and they're played okay. And I'm thinking, my God, he might be a $20 million a year receiver. And it's hard to pay both your starting receivers that kind of money. So to your point, I'm really curious, because you're going to have a really motivated Jaylen Waddle. We're going to have 3 or 4 guys looking to get new contracts that are going to be out there flying around and making plays, trying to get back. Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips. You got some contracts that are guys are going, hey, I need to get paid. I want to get paid. The second contract's the life-changing contract in this league, the way it's set up, and he's going to want to get paid. But I think it's a great question of how he's used. We know Tyreek Hill is going to be the most targeted guy. If he stays healthy, 180 targets. If he plays every game and he's healthy, and then what's left for Waddle if he's really healthy? 110, 120. Mm-hmm. So he's going to try to make the best of it. But I'm really curious. That's a great question to see what happens with Jaylen Waddle going forward. And if the Dolphins, a lot of teams won't pay two guys big time contracts on the outside. You got a budget every position. How much? How much of the Dolphins? We know that they'll pay cover corners. They'll pay two of them a lot of money. That's what history says. We've done it with different combinations of guys over the last 3 or 4 years. I want to see how we feel about the wide receiver position, and because they're such a big part of the offense. Hell, we're talking about a third wide receiver, and how high are we going to do that if we can't get Beckham or one of these other guys?
Right. My last question for you is, at this stage of the offseason, there was a lot of questions in February about how competitive of a team they would be able to field with the salary cap crunch and the contracts, and what was the roster going to look like with the turnover. Now that you've had a chance to see the first wave of free agency, what are your expectations looking like for the 2024 season? And there's a lot that still has to happen, but how lofty do you think the goals could or should be for this Dolphins team versus maybe how you thought they would be in February?
They should be really high again this year. We all in for last year. We went all in for this year, minus losing a couple really good football players. But we got some draft picks this year. All right, we got higher draft picks to work with, or a higher draft pick right now that could turn into more. Yeah, man, it's about right now. As long as you got the Tyreeks and Jalen Ramseys and all the other, you got your 4-speed guys that had an amazing amount of touchdowns between the 4 of them. I have high expectations for this team. We got a number that really bothers me, and it bothers a lot of Dolphins fans. We're now dead last in National Football League. I think the number's 24 years without winning a playoff. Nobody wants to hear about winning record, 9-8. Nobody wants to hear about 10-7. People want to see success in the playoffs. And I'm going to say it again. I know my guys give me a lot of shit for saying this. We got to win the AFC. It's going to be our best chance to have success throughout these playoffs. We need to play in our weather and our stadium to win some games. Mostly our crowd is going to be our best chance to have success. But 11 wins was great. We haven't had 11 wins in a while. But the way you play at the end of the year kind of takes away from it, man. I mean, and that other number, by the way, the thing I love too about Mike McDaniel, Kyle, he talks about it. He talks about, hey, I know, man. I know we haven't won a playoff game. It's not his fault. He's only been here for 2 of the 24 years, but it continues. And I thought last year's team was really talented. I thought it was really, really talented team. The most talented team they've had in more than 20 years. So I don't change. And I know the schedule doesn't get any easier. And I'm not one to look ahead of who's going to be really good or who's going to be really bad this year. I don't know what the Bills are going to look like. Everybody wants to know. The Bills didn't really go out. They signed a lot of their own guys back, but they got the same guy at quarterback. A lot of people think the Jets did the best job of anybody in what they've added to their football team. I don't know how you feel about that. They got a ton of first-round picks on their defensive line now. And they've got some guys they got to find out if they can stay healthy. But this is a big year, man. It's a big year for Mike. It's a big year for Chris and for that football team, because expectations have not changed. I know for a fact when those guys call and talk to New York or Palm Beach, the big guy, Mr. Ross, when he asks you something, you better tell him like, hey, so what are we looking like? I mean, he wants to win right now. Whether you like, decisions he's made or not as an owner, he spends money, but he wants to win. And so I think this is a big year. My expectations have not changed for this team. How about for you?
I agree with just about everything you said, and I have tried to keep perspective and patience throughout the early stages and early years of the rebuild, and the sustained success of winning records has not been lost on me. But at this stage of the game, when you're this deep into it, it has to be about more than just consistently being a winning program. I take a lot of pride as a fan of the team for what the past 4 years has brought from consistent success versus what the previous 20 years before that did. But I agree with you wholeheartedly about Buffalo's roster regression this year and moving on from Stephon Diggs and Miami and the transitions that they've made. You got to close that gap with that football team. You got to find a way to beat that football team, because if you just beat them half the times you lost to them, I mean, this would be a top 6 record in the NFL over the past 4 years, this football team. And to your point about winning on the road, the Dolphins are 3-15 in the playoffs on the road all time in franchise history. 3-15 road record in the playoffs. So getting those home games is essential. It's a must, and not getting that is almost a non-starter for you reaching what your goals are for the team.
You know, Kyle, I bring this up, and this is just personal. I've been through this. In the 80s, we had a lot of success winning the AFC East, and one of my teammates, Kim Bocamper, made me aware of the fact. Do you realize the 2 Super Bowls that we went to, and even the AFC Championship game that we lost? We didn't win any games on the road. All our wins were Orange Bowl. There was no win in road games. I don't have any great stories to tell you about David Woodley or Don Strock or Bob Greasy or Dan Marino going on the road, you know, on my teams in the 80s. We didn't win on the road. we never played. When we went deep, when we went to Super Bowl, everything went through the Orange Bowl. That's where we were really good, beating the Jets and the Steelers in different years in those games. So I think it's the same way. Get your confidence, take advantage of home field advantage, which we seem to play a lot better at home, minus Tennessee game last year. And so, I'm really curious though, because for me, expectations, I know everybody wants to know. And I'm going to tell you one other one we haven't talked about. And this is what happens. I got all this build up because I haven't had a chance to talk to you for a while. If they believe Tua, if Mike and Chris, who meet all the time, and anybody else in the little group, if they believe Tua is their quarterback, then sign him. Both of you sign off because you guys are responsible. If he's the guy, let's go for it. Hey, I think he's got, hey, Mike goes in Chris's office. Hey, I think he's got another level he can go. Great. I mean, I step back and, okay, and Chris is going, well, I drafted him, and you believe he's that good. Let's get that extension done. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to second guess neither one of those guys, because I know a hell of a lot more about being a GM and head coach than I do. But they better be right. I mean, if you're all in, it's great. If that's the guy we need to get to where we're talking about, and maybe someday going back to another Super Bowl, which, by the way, I played in the last Super Bowl, and that was a long time ago, Super Bowl 19. So whatever they need to do, man, psyche of the or whatever, freeing up more money, but it's now. It's got to be about right now. And I think the best thing you can do to improve this team to the next level is that upcoming draft in a couple weeks. You with me?
Yeah. And I think that's an exciting time for Dolphins fans, and we'll see what they ultimately end up choosing to do with it. Joe, I'd love to have you back after the draft. Talk about some of these picks.
You get a lot of stuff, and by the way, I understand not everybody agrees with my my take on all this stuff, and sometimes I get way too emotionally attached to it, and it gets me in trouble sometimes. But I feel strongly, man. This is when you think of Miami Dolphins football, I don't think about a team that hadn't won a playoff game in 24 years. That's right. Supposed to be Cleveland and Detroit and Cincinnati in the old days, where we used to laugh and they're bad teams. And here we are, even with those winning records, have not been able to win a playoff game. So we got to get there. Got to get there first.
Yep. And this is another season of expectation, as you said. So we will circle back after the draft and have you on, and we'll talk about these picks and if they achieved what we were hoping that they would with those investment opportunities in the draft. And Joe, thanks for coming on and talking Miami Dolphins football.
Kyle, do it every day of the week, man. Do it in the evening, anytime you want me, brother. I think you're as good as anybody in the business at this covering this team and really breaking it down. So it's always a pleasure to be with you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.